Sanbonani, Tokozani, Mulweni, hartelijke welkom and warm greetings to you, dear listeners, to our Astrology Indaba podcast, Season 1, Episode 1. Before we begin with our interview today, I would like to introduce myself and the theme of today's episode. My name is Ryan Edmonds. I am a traditional healer, diviner, astrologer, trainer of yoga teachers, and ASCHP registered wellness counselor living in the gorgeous Cape Winelands of South Africa. Today I'm excited to announce the first of our Astrology Indaba podcast episodes, where I am featuring an interview with Karen James, who is the COSAPA Chairperson. COSAPA is the community of Southern African professional astrologers, that's Southern African professional astrologers, of which I'm also honored to be on the board of governors. The timing for our interview was very exciting. We set it to an election of a Mercury day in the planetary hours of Venus and Mercury, the day before the full moon of the winter solstice 2024 at the peak of midday. This podcast is a first for the Southern African astrological community, giving a voice to students, professionals, teachers, and seasoned practitioners of the art. Although I will later on be hosting astrological experts from all around the world, the roots of this podcast are firmly established in the rich and fertile soils of Southern Africa. As such, we would like to welcome all of our listeners and ask please that you join us around the fireside of our monthly astrological Indaba, where we will be hosting elders and wise ones, as we, in the words of the COSAPA motto, aim for the stars. You can look forward to a diverse array of voices on this show in the episodes to come, as I strive to bring unity to the diverse paths, traditions, practices, and disciplines we as Southern African astrologers are proud to display. We welcome all astrological backgrounds and traditions and foster a space that is safe, kind, and above all else, respectful. It takes many unique stars to make a constellation, and many constellations to weave together the story of the skies. Indaba, gather round, and let's begin. So welcome to everybody for our first COSAPA podcast. We are so excited. I'm sitting here today with Karen James, who is the chairperson of COSAPA, and I thought what a wonderful opportunity for us to interview the person who was the root inspiration among many people for the forming of COSAPA. And today we're going to ask her questions a little bit about who she is as a person, as an astrologer, and what her vision and the mission is for this exciting association to take root in South Africa. So I would like to welcome you, Karen, onto our first podcast. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you, Ryan.
Wonderful. So Karen, before we get into our chat about COSAPA and all the exciting things that are going to flourish from here, I would actually really love to know about you and your little bit about your journey as an astrologer, how you fell in love with astrology, and what brings you to sit with me today.
Okay. So my journey with astrology began in my very early 40s. Unbeknownst to me, I had Pluto squaring Pluto and Neptune squaring Neptune at the same time. And so, that is the midlife story that all of us have to navigate through. Although with Pluto being such an erratic planet, that can vary dramatically depending on what generation one is born in. But for my generation, I'm in my early 60s now, just turned 60 last year. I'm about to turn 61. So that generation, it's very definitely part of the midlife story. And so the Pluto thing is, it's lessons of power, how our personal power versus being overpowered by others versus, lessons of disempowerment, empowerment, and so on. And then the Neptune can be a very confusing time, because the Neptune square Neptune is basically, as my teacher, one of my teachers, Rod Suskin, described it as being in a little boat on a lake with no oars. And so you have to trust, and it's learning to have faith that the wind will gently send the waves and move the boat to some other shore that you weren't quite expecting. And it's having faith in trusting what's greater than oneself. And so basically what happened with me is I had a career crisis, and I had done administration and bookkeeping in that for many years, and then decided to change course and go into computer programming and electronics and whatnot. But really that was very unsuited to my nature. So, and indicative of never being sure about what my vocation was from having left school. I did ask for advice, and I was told, oh, you can do anything you put your mind to. And so, yeah, the direction was very unclear, which is why I landed up just doing bookkeeping and things. And yeah, so when that electronics and computer programming and things I just knew in my being that it just wasn't going to be for me. It was very distressing, because I didn't really want to go back to the bookkeeping, and I really didn't want to go ahead with electronic stuff, opening computers and all that stuff. So the confusion was huge. I definitely felt disempowered, and I went and did a series of psychological counseling, and the person just comforted me. But again, the direction wasn't being given. So I was very stuck. And at one point I decided, well, I can't, the psychology counseling isn't really helping. And through a friend of mine, I was living in Durban at the time, I was told about a wonderful astrologer who also happened to be a homeopathic doctor. And she knew her personally. And so I thought, well, astrology sessions are like 1 or 2 sessions, and let's see what comes of this. It's not a whole long process, which might not kind of resolve things. So off I went, and this lady could see what had been happening with me. She understood so much from the astrology and was able to explain that to me. So that took away, I was very much blaming myself and thought, oh my goodness, I've really made a complete mess here. And so it gave me A, relief, and then B, direction. And because I found her counseling, she was a very loving, caring lady with the astrology. So I was very drawn to what she was doing. And it so happened that she was actually a very well-trained astrologer. Her name was Dr. Yvonne Dyson, and she had attended international conferences. She was taught horary by by Olivia Barclay, and she had done financial astrology with another expert in London, and all kinds of fascinating things. But at the time that I went to see her, she was doing like a tea party astrology once a week on a Thursday. That was the day that she did. She used her days, like she did medicine on a Tuesday. And so astrology was on a Thursday morning. And so we would do all different kinds of astrologies, like And that actually suited me because I like to be kind of open-minded, and I'm fairly inquisitive. But it didn't get me too much closer to actually being able to do what she could do. So I carried on with her, but then there were quite a few of us who were quite keen to really become skilled. So I decided to start studying with Noel Till, who did modern psychological astrology. And I think the book that really drew me to him was his book on careers and vocation, which of course has been one of my issues throughout my life. It's been a theme. So yeah, so I went and did that. And then I was more than halfway through, and another friend of mine had decided that she desperately wanted to study with Rod Suskin, who up until then only gave in-person classes in Cape Town. So living in Durban, it was a problem. But my friend in Durban found out that he was going to do the correspondence and enrolled and so on. And then she was so thrilled with what she was learning, because Rod's course is very structured. It's very got clear steps as you progress through the various lessons that he teaches and so on. So, but now Rod was teaching traditional. So me being me, I decided, okay, let's do this as well. So I also enrolled. But then I found like the modern and the traditional, doing the two together was a bit much. So I put the modern psychological. I had learned a lot from Noel Till, including how to counsel. So that was a very lovely thing to have learned. And then with Rod, I firmed up. I love the fact that our astrology is rooted in ancient, like we were saying earlier on, that astrology is rooted in the ancient world, and it's been with us for thousands of years. It's across so many cultures. If we go back into the history of all the cultures of the world, there is this affinity for looking at that sky and learning from the sky, getting messages and understanding. So yeah, so that I then proceeded through Rod's course, which I passed, and I remain incredibly inquisitive. So after that, I decided to actually, while I was doing my last year with Rod, I ventured into finding out more about the weather. There was a lady called Carolyn Egan who lived in Rhode Island, and that is on the east coast of America, was very prone to hurricanes. So she got into weather astrology, and she said weather astrology was better than natal. So she devoted her life to that, and she had a small course. So I did that. And then she said, if you want to advance, you must read McCormack's book. And he had been one of the founder members of the American Astrology Association. He was an engineer, and he had written a correspondence course. He had passed by the time, I think he passed in 1987. So I think it's David Rowell. He managed to, I think Philip Graves had a copy of McCormack's correspondence course, and they put it in book form, and I was able to get that. So I studied that as well. And then through the weather, I became so aware of the southern skies as opposed to the northern skies.
And I was about to ask you, there must have been while at that time you were studying, such a was there like a dissociation, like you're thinking, well, this is fascinating, but how do I apply it? Or was it more excitement of, now what am I going to do with this?
Yes. So, obviously during the course with Carolyn Egan, it wasn't an in-person thing. So you just got her little CDs and you went through it. So all the examples were Northern Hemisphere. And then McCormack he used to project his weather astrology across the world. He was always looking to find out where did the storm system start and so on. And so he would also project down into the southern hemisphere. And in weather, we are very concerned about declination. Even Carolyn Egan, she brought it in right away. So that is, you take the Earth's equator, project it out, and you've got the planets dancing north and south of the equator, which we don't use as much in modern astrology, but in weather it's huge. And so what McCormack said, he said that one has to, if the planets are sitting down in the south of the celestial equator, it's going to affect the southern hemisphere more dramatically and much less dramatically. So there's a huge big pileup of planets in the south. Then you must know the big storm patterns are going to be in the southern hemisphere and milder north. So that sort of keyed me in, and it just so happened at the same time, because I didn't know how to do it technically, and then also the very definition of Aries is spring. And when we plot 0 Aries, if the sun is at 0 Aries for us, yeah, it's not spring.
Before we started this the recording of this interview, Karen, you and I were talking about how exciting this is, and the southern hemisphere mysteries that we as astrologers are all trying to unravel. Is this part of COSAPA's work, do you think? Is there room for this in the formulation of COSAPA, for us as astrologers to go out there into the field and do some field work and research and experimenting and maybe even push some boundaries?
Absolutely. I think it's a huge sky out there. I mean, the sky is vast, and there's room for all of it. There's room for traditional, and there certainly is room for us understanding more about southern hemisphere, southern skies dynamics. Even if we look at the moon, if we're looking at the crescent moon at the moment, our moon is waxing here in the southern hemisphere. When we look up at that night sky and we cup our hand around the moon, we will make a C shape. And the very same moon, viewed from London or New York or anywhere in Europe or Asia and the Northern Hemisphere, they will cup their hand the other way. So there is there's a visual thing. The south is icy cold, and the north is where the sun rides across the sky, and vice versa. So, those signs of the zodiac are absolutely key to the northern seasons. So yeah, so I had to find a way because we are more or less on the same longitude as, say, Austria. So now if you draw up the start of weather astrology, you draw up an ingress chart. So you're going to draw up a chart for Joburg and somewhere in Austria. It's the same chart. So how do you read that? So for me, I found a couple of quotations in McCormack, and so I flipped the signs. So I just would print out the chart and just put the opposite signs for everything. I just scratched it out and
South Africans, we've always been boundary pushers, right? Especially since we were reborn in 94. We've pushed boundaries with our constitution. I feel we've got one of the most progressive human rights in the world, one of the most progressive cultures and societies. And from what I'm hearing from you, it feels like COSAPA is very much in alignment with the South African flavor of astrological research, of inclusivity. You mentioned that there's room in the sky for all of us, but I have a feeling that your vision is is not just the sky, but a little bit more close to home. Tell us about that. What is COSAPA's vision of unity and bringing together of different practitioners?
Okay, so perhaps I should just begin by saying that before we were COSAPA, we were CAA, the Cape Astrological Association. And it was founded by Rod Suskin and two other ladies. And it grew over the years, but it was very much an in-person thing. And then came the lockdown of the 2020s. And at that time, I mean, we had CAA did amazing things with Richard Fiddler as chair. He organized that amazing Astrology Rediscovered conference where Robert Hand and various other astrologers came through. He did that in conjunction with Erna Carapacino at Shambhala. So they were doing amazing things. And then lockdown. And then Nancy took over. And then a few years into her chairpersonship, lockdown happened. So she opened the meetings up on Zoom. And so for the very first time, so she was very much, like you were saying, that pioneering South African spirit. So she pioneered the fact that we could join from wherever. And at the time, I was living down in the Garden Route, where I still stay. And a whole lot of us who knew her, because she is also a Rod Suskin graduate, joined, because it was so fabulous to be able to be part of South African discussions and, you know, meeting up with South African astrologers and so on. And then, so at that shift, it became a national thing, even though it was still called Cape Astrology Association. And yeah, so I was an ardent attendee of talks and things. I also gave a little talk on weather astrology introduction and so on. And in, I think it's 2022, Nancy asked me if I would like to become the chairperson. And the vice chair was Michaela Meiser. And so we jointly became co-chair. And from there, we slowly wanted, I had a great vision to open up COSAPA, or to open up the organization, change the identity, because I felt it not fair for people from other provinces to be labeled Cape. Although Cape is a wonderful place and all the rest, for me, it wasn't descriptive enough. So finally, this year, I changed the name.
And what does it stand for? What does COSAPA or COSAPA stand for?
So it's the community of Southern African professional astrologers. And it's very much a community. It's for astrologers, by astrologers, and yeah, so, and it's for the growth of our astrology and our personal growth. And yeah, and I'm very open to suggestions and ideas and things. I have, you know, and we have our wonderful committee. Ryan, of course, is on the committee. We're now the board of governors in case one day we want to become a genuine NPO registered, but we've put the brakes on doing that right now, because one has to walk before one runs, I think. COSAPA should walk.
Very, very beautiful. And I love the community. Why did you go with community, not society or association or guild, or what was community?
Because I believe that humans are at their finest when we're open-hearted and open-minded. And so the community is describing that it's a big sky out there, like I was saying before. And so we accept people, whether you're modern, psychological, evolutionary, strict traditional, medieval, progressive research for me, and yeah, and for the for the organization. I believe that all of that should be, there's enough space. We don't have to, and so that for me, that's the community aspect, that it's inclusive and there's a friendliness.
Mm. When you say professional astrologers, are students welcome? Is the layperson welcome who's still learning? Who is COSAPA for?
Okay, so again, there is an inclusiveness. The professional is for our practitioners and our teachers. So on our website, we categorize by practitioners, we've got a separate page for teachers, a separate page for specialists who are really masters of their particular aspects of astrology. Then we've got students. Most students don't want to be on the website, but we've got a category for students within our organization. So they are super welcome. We really do welcome the students. And enthusiasts, people who just want to support, they're also more than welcome. So the big criterion for me is respect. So as long as people who want to be part of our organization are prepared to respect each other and not be rude, because somehow in some corners of the astrological world, there can be a lot of enmity.
And I think that's true probably for any path, religion, a group of people. We're going to have some sandpaper to help us refine ourselves, isn't it?
And look, the sandpaper is okay, but in terms of the fact that we're embracing the diversity of the various things, then one of the things that I really, as a chairperson, won't tolerate is rudeness and attacking.
That's our country motto: unity through diversity, isn't it? Bringing the differences together, not scattering them apart. I love that.
And years ago, when I still did admin work, I attended a talk on labor relations. I think they were bringing in new legislation, and this professor from Rhodes said that, because he was one of those conciliation people, that attended all these very hectic meetings. He said, if more people had respect for each other, he would hardly have a job. So a lot of the time, the conflict areas occur because there's a lack of respect, where one organization, one school of thought thinks they know it all, that they own the whole of astrology. And so, yeah, so that is one of the tricky parts of having an organization which embraces the diversity. But I think that the cornerstone of that respect and not being rude to each other, if people don't like that particular style of astrology, then I invite them to just move along. And
because we all share the love. We all share the love for the astrology. At the end of the day, that's why we're here. And our community isn't massive. The South African astrological community is not as big as many other passions, interests, and studies, I'm sure. So we're a niche group, and we should be really excited by our varied views and interests and passions. And maybe that's a part of what your vision is with COSAPA, for us to celebrate, debate, and healthily discuss topics together. That excites me when I hear that.
Exactly, because we should all arrive at similar, it's like all roads lead to Rome. We should we should all be able to describe Rome in one way or another from our varying viewpoints. And
Yeah.
so if we kept that respectful open-mindedness, we could learn from the conclusions of the other, even if we don't want to go and master a whole nother school of astrology, be it vibrational or Uranian school of astrology, or I mean, there are so many. We might not want to go there. It's a whole hours and hours of work and training to master each branch. But nonetheless, and on a discussion level, we can each bring to that. I mean, often when I do mundane astrology, because I'm fascinated by that, because weather actually is a branch of mundane astrology. So I like to do various different charts for a country and see what each little perspective gives, like look at this event on this founding chart, on this big event chart, see what we can glean from it. So yeah, definitely I'm an embracer of diversity.
I love
And
that, and I think a big part of what you and me and the other beautiful committee members of COSAPA have chatted about so far is one of the things that I would love for the podcast is to put out the varied and diverse voices of South African astrology, to hear each person's unique song. How do they see the heavens? How do they see it manifesting in our lives? And so that we can hear each instrument in the orchestra that is playing together. And I think
beautiful.
that's really where you and I hit it off with the thought of getting a podcast going together. So for the people who are listening to us, we really would value feedback and input as we're learning, as we're growing the podcast, and what you are interested in. What would you love to hear more about, discover, learn? Who are your favorite astrologers in South Africa whose voices you might want to hear? And we can be a conduit for them to share their message. What do you think, Karen?
I think that's absolutely fantastic. I am so thrilled that you are pioneering podcasting for us, because it is something that was on my initial wish list when we brought this whole COSAPA into being. So I'm beyond thrilled. I love your ideas and visions. I love that you want to get ideas from people from the public, from the general public, from other astrologers. Yes, it's brilliant, that inclusiveness, that there's that community spirit coming through again. So brilliant. I think that's fantastic.
Wonderful. Thank you. And we are not professional podcasters, but we are learning. And so we really invite everybody who watches this and listens to this to join us on that journey. And a year from now, I'm sure we'll look back at this first video, this first audio, and we'll see how much we've grown. So please join us, grow with us, learn with us, debate positively with us, so that we can all expand our consciousness and our hearts. Because if there's one thing South Africans understand, it's the heart, and it's coming and doing things from the heart as well. Before we wrap up our session for today, and this is not the last interview we're going to have with Karen, because she's a deep well of information and wisdom and inspiration. I would like to ask Karen, is there anything you would like to share with our listeners on behalf of yourself or COSAPA, whether it's the mission statement or just something from your heart that we can bring the session to our closure?
Okay, two small things. Thank you, Ryan. One is the word professional. So that word professional means that so that applies to practitioners basically, and teachers, of course, but it means that we are earning a living with our astrology. And it doesn't mean you have to have a whole string of diplomas and degrees behind your name. you can be self-taught. There are many astrologers who are self-taught, and there have been some very famous astrologers who've been self-taught. So if you have walked that path, done your own studies from books, and I mean, there's so much now on the internet, you are super welcome to join us. What you'd have to do is just give us a description of your route that you've taken and what kind of astrology you practice and so on, and some testimonials, and you'd be super welcome to be listed under our practitioners. That's the first thing. And then the next thing is that our motto is aiming for the stars. So long term, I would like to build up a community of confident astrologer presenters, so that we could have conferences here in South Africa, because we've got a beautiful country, and bring in people from other parts of the globe to South Africa to listen to a thoroughly Southern African conference, to be part of, that will enhance tourism. It will be good for the conference organizers, because conferences are big money outlays. So that's my long-term dream. I know we have to go through like doing national conferences and that, but long-term, that's what I would love to see, a really stunning Southern African conference that's attended by obviously Southern Africans, but also that we're so confident and so well known that we are able to draw attendees from overseas to enjoy.
I noticed you say Southern African, not South African. Just give us a word on that quickly.
Okay, so we initially started as being South Africa, and then discussing among the board of governor members, we decided that we would like to include Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland, Zimbabwe, because I would imagine that the astrology there is possibly quite small. And so again, we could widen the community to this part. Actually, when I very, very first took the chair from Nancy and joined up with Michaela, I wanted to do an African astrology association. And but then in conversation with everyone, I realized that's possibly too large a vision. So I think the Southern African is a very manageable concept, a very manageable community. Because, once you head up into Africa, there's different languages and whole lot of huge diversity to start accommodating.
Yes.
So we have to first walk before we can run.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Karen, thank you for being here today. I feel like we didn't have nearly enough time, but we're going to have more conversations, more discussions and chats as we go. And you and I were saying there were so many beautiful synchronicities happening today. We're recording this on a Mercury day on Wednesday. We began in the planetary hour of Venus. So there's a lot of love coming from here. There's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of space for wisdom, learning, and education. And so the seeds of our podcast have been planted in a beautiful soil. I know that the waxing moon is also in Scorpio now, so a little bit of mystery, a little bit of magic that we can also dive into on our journey together. Karen, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing this space with us all. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Stay blessed and take care.
Thanks, Ryan.
So there you have it, folks. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to this channel for many more exciting episodes featuring fascinating voices in the astrological community. As we grow and learn, so I'm sure we will form a beautiful tribe here together under the starry skies of Southern Africa. Until next time, keep aiming for the stars.